In 1943, as Winston Churchill stockpiled 170,000 tons of Australian wheat for what he called future needs, 3 million Bengalis starved to death. Newly declassified telegrams, buried for decades, reveal this wasn't a tragedy born of war's chaos, it was policy, cold and deliberate. The story begins in Bengal, 1942. Japan's invasion of Burma slices through the region's rice supply lines like a scythe. Burma, a key exporter, supplied Bengal with 15% of its rice, hundreds of thousands of tons, gone overnight. The British, fearing Japanese troops might sweep into India, enact their denial policy. They order the destruction of anything the enemy could use. In Bengal, this means torching rice fields and smashing 66,000 fishing boats to splinters. Coastal communities, already lean from war rationing, lose their nets and their livelihoods. Fish rot on unreachable shores. Families who once hauled in daily catches now wade through mud for roots. The air in Bengal's villages grows thick with the stench of burning crops, a bitter haze that lingers for months. By early 1943, the famine takes hold. Reports flood the colonial administration, skeletal children clawing at empty granaries, mothers boiling grass to quiet crying infants. In Calcutta, bodies pile in alleys, too many for carts to carry. The smell of death mixes with the humid rot of unharvested rice paddies. British officials cable London, begging for grain. Churchill, hunched over maps in Whitehall, dismisses the pleas. Indian exaggeration, he calls it, his pen scratching out replies that mock the desperation. In a 1931 speech, he'd already set the tone, Indians breed like rabbits, he'd said, his voice dripping with contempt. Now, as millions starve, he leans on that prejudice. One telegram, sent in August 1943, captures his scorn, if famine is so severe, why hasn't Gandhi died yet? The words, typed on crisp war office paper, land like a slap in Delhi. The crisis deepens. In Bengal's markets, rice prices soar 500%. A single cup costs a day's wages, if wages exist. Families trade heirlooms for handfuls of grain, only to find husks mixed with dirt. Starving villagers scavenge roadkill, rats, dogs, anything with flesh. Flies swarm over open sores on children too weak to swat them away. The monsoon, usually a blessing, turns roads to sludge, trapping relief trucks. Yet in London, the War Cabinet meets in September 1943, and the minutes, declassified only in 2009, reveal a decision that seals Bengal's fate. Churchill orders a fleet of Australian ships, loaded with 170,000 tons of wheat, to sail past India's starving shores. The grain, harvested from sun-baked fields near Sydney, is bound for British stockpiles in Europe, insurance for a post-war future. The ship's wakes churn the Bay of Bengal, visible from coastal villages where fishermen, their boats burned, watch with hollow eyes. The scent of wheat, faint but unmistakable, drifts from the hulls as they pass. But the most damning evidence lay buried in a locked filing cabinet, forgotten in a Whitehall basement until 2009. A memo, stamped, confidential, orders British newspapers to suppress photographs of the famine. Protect morale, it reads, as if skeletal bodies in Calcutta might dampen London's resolve. Editors comply, spiking images of children with ribs like ladder rungs, of mothers cradling corpses. The British public, fed stories of wartime sacrifice, remains blissfully unaware. In Bengal, silence settles over the streets of Calcutta. No cries, no footsteps, only the rustle of vultures circling overhead, their wings casting shadows on bloated bodies. A survivor's voice cuts through the haze. My sister traded her wedding bangles for 1 cup of rice, she recalls, her words recorded decades later. When we poured it out, it was mud mixed with husks. She ate it anyway. She died that night. The memory hangs heavy, a single thread in a tapestry of loss. In rural Bengal, families stop naming their dead. Graves are shallow, scratched into the earth with sticks. No markers, no prayers, just silence. Across the ocean, Churchill's focus remains on Europe. The Viceroy of India, Lord Wavell, cables London in October 1943, his words frantic, "We're causing genocide by ledger books." The telegram, marked urgent, sits unanswered on Churchill's desk. Wavell pleads for grain, for ships, for anything. He details the math. Bengal needs 50,000 tons of rice monthly to stabilize. Australia's surplus could cover it. Instead, those ships dock in Liverpool, their holds brimming with wheat that could have fed millions. The grain piles high in British warehouses, guarded for a future that Bengal's dead will never see. The Viceroy's warning, like the famine itself, is buried under wartime priorities. In the villages, despair takes root. A mother, her hands trembling, washes her son's face with dust from the ground. "So he'd look clean when God took him," she whispers, her voice barely audible over the wind. The boy, 5 years old, lies still, his eyes glassy. She buries him under a banyan tree, her fingers bleeding from digging. No one records his name. Across Bengal, the death toll climbs, 1.5 million, then 2 million, then 3 million. The numbers blur, too vast for comprehension. Bodies float down the Hooghly River, tangling in reeds. By 1945, the famine begins to ebb. Japan's retreat reopens Burma's rice routes. Relief trickles in, too late for millions. Churchill, hailed as the architect of victory, accepts accolades in London's gilded halls. In 1953, he'll win the Nobel Prize for Literature, his speeches immortalized. In Bengal, survivors dig mass graves, their hands caked with earth. No markers rise over the pits. No names are carved. The stench of rotting rice stockpiles in Sydney, untouched by the war's end, lingers in the imagination, a ghost of what could have been. The declassified telegrams, unearthed decades later, tell the story Churchill's legacy omitted. They detail the tonnage diverted, the pleas ignored, the photographs suppressed. They reveal a man who saw India not as a partner but as a burden, its people expendable in the arithmetic of empire. The Australian wheat, enough to feed Bengal for months, sat in British silos while vultures feasted. The boats burned, the crops torched, the lives erased, all by policy, not accident. In Bengal's unmarked graves, the truth lies buried, silent but unyielding.